Tanzania has been plunged into chaos following its October 29, 2025 general elections, which have been widely condemned as flawed and unfair. The ruling party, Chama cha Mapinduzi (CCM), retained power amid accusations of vote rigging, intimidation, and the arrest of opposition leaders. Many opposition candidates were either disqualified or detained before polling day, leaving voters with limited political choices. As a result, protests erupted in major cities such as Dar es Salaam, Arusha, and Mwanza, with thousands of young people, many from the so-called Gen Z generation, taking to the streets to express frustration over what they saw as a sham election and a lack of democracy. The government's response was swift and heavy-handed. Military units were deployed in key towns, curfews were imposed, and internet access was severely restricted to block the sharing of protest footage. In several regions, clashes broke out between demonstrators and security forces, with reports of tear gas, live bullets, and widespread vandalism. Government offices and vehicles were torched, and commercial activity came to a standstill in some areas. For many young Tanzanians, the protests were not just about politics, they were also an outcry against rising unemployment, high living costs, and years of economic frustration. As the unrest intensified, the effects began to spill over into neighboring Kenya, especially at the busy Namanga border. The normally calm trading town has turned tense, with Tanzanian security forces reportedly firing tear gas canisters that drifted across the border as protesters fled toward the Kenyan side. Cross-border trade has been disrupted as trucks and buses remain stranded, shops closed, and businesspeople from both countries forced to suspend operations. Internet and phone network disruptions in Tanzania have further complicated communications between traders who rely on mobile money and online transactions for business. The chaos has also drawn in Kenyan youths living along the border. Frustrated by the halt in trade and curious about the events unfolding just a few kilometers away, some groups of young men have been gathering near the border fence, chanting slogans in solidarity with Tanzanian protesters and attempting to cross into Tanzania despite tight security. Others, mostly small-scale traders and porters who depend on daily cross-border movement, have tried to force their way through closed checkpoints to access the Tanzanian market. Security agencies on the Kenyan side have since been deployed to maintain order and prevent any unlawful crossings, with Interior PS Raymond Omalo urging youths to remain calm and avoid being drawn into the chaos. For residents of Namanga and nearby towns, the situation has become increasingly volatile. The smell of tear gas occasionally drifts across the border, and fears of escalating violence remain high. Businesses have suffered major losses, and families that straddle the two sides of the border are now cut off from one another. The Kenyan government continues to monitor the developments closely, assuring citizens that security has been heightened at all border points to protect lives and property. In essence, Tanzania's post-election unrest has exposed deep political and social frustrations within the country and triggered ripple effects beyond its borders. While the protests began as a fight for democracy, they have now evolved into a regional concern, one that has left the Kenya-Tanzania border tense, with youths on both sides caught between anger, uncertainty, and the hope for peace and justice. In the border towns of Kenya, especially Namanga, Taveta, and Loitoktok, the news of election chaos in Tanzania has stirred a mix of emotions among the youth. For many, the images of Tanzanian protesters filling the streets, waving placards, and demanding change strike a deep chord. Across Kenya's side of the border, groups of young people gather around small tea kiosks and roadside markets, their conversations dominated by one topic: what's really happening in Tanzania? To some, the events are a wake-up call. They see their Tanzanian counterparts as brave, finally standing up to a system they believe has long silenced the voices of ordinary citizens. They're doing what most of us have always wanted to do, one young man at the Namanga border reportedly said. When the system doesn't listen, people have no choice but to rise. Many Kenyan youths, especially those unemployed or frustrated by economic hardship, identify with that feeling of being ignored and powerless. The protests across the border remind them of their own struggles: limited job opportunities, corruption, and the sense that leaders are often detached from the realities of young people. But not everyone sees it the same way. Others among the Kenyan youths are worried that the violence and chaos could spill over into Kenya. Some who work in cross-border trade or transport fear for their livelihoods, as the closure of the Namanga crossing has already disrupted business. "We survive on daily income from trade," a young boda rider said. "Now everything has stopped, and even going near the border feels risky." The tension has created uncertainty about what will happen next, whether Tanzania will calm down or if the unrest might inspire similar movements on the Kenyan side. Still, there is a strong current of curiosity. Kenyan youths have been closely following updates on social media despite the Tanzanian internet shutdown. Hashtags like #Tanzania protests and #StandWithTZYouth have started circulating among Kenyan users, especially on TikTok and X, formerly Twitter. Online, young Kenyans share clips of Tanzanian demonstrators facing police, some voicing support, others warning against violence. There's a sense of regional solidarity, East African youths connecting over shared frustrations with governance and unemployment, even across borders. At the Namanga border itself, the atmosphere is tense but charged with energy. Groups of young men occasionally chant in Swahili, "Uhuru kwa wote," freedom for all, while waving branches or placards. Some have tried to move closer to the Tanzanian side, claiming they want to stand with their brothers, though Kenyan security officers have been quick to hold them back. The police presence has grown heavier, and officers have been urging restraint, warning the youth not to cross into Tanzania or engage in any unlawful acts. Deep down, however, many of these Kenyan youths are reflecting inward. They are comparing the Tanzanian struggle to their own situation, asking questions about leadership, youth representation, and accountability in their country. Some express admiration for the courage of Tanzanian youths. Others express fear that such uprisings could easily turn tragic. Yet, beneath all the mixed emotions, fear, admiration, anger, and curiosity, lies one common thought: young people across East Africa are restless. They want their voices heard, their opportunities expanded, and their leaders held accountable. As the dust continues to rise on the Tanzanian side, the youths in Kenya are watching closely, talking, debating, and imagining. They know that what happens in Tanzania today could shape conversations about youth, governance, and justice across the region tomorrow. At the usually bustling Namanga border post, where long queues of trucks and buses once crawled steadily between Kenya and Tanzania, an eerie silence has now taken over. Shops that once sold everything from fruits and textiles to spare parts have their doors shut. The smell of freshly roasted maize and grilled meat that used to fill the air has been replaced by dust and the faint scent of tear gas drifting from the Tanzanian side. For years, Namanga has been more than just a border point. It's been a lifeline. Every morning, traders from Nairobi, Arusha, and beyond would converge there, moving goods, exchanging currency, and catching up on the latest news. Kenyan and Tanzanian traders worked side by side. Some had even become family friends. But since the eruption of post-election chaos in Tanzania, that rhythm has been broken. Trucks loaded with cement, food, and manufactured goods now sit idle on both sides of the border, their drivers sleeping in cabs, waiting for clearance that never seems to come. Tanzanian customs officials are operating in fear, and Kenyan border officers are under strict orders to limit movement for safety reasons. "We used to cross the border several times a day," says a young Kenyan trader who sells second-hand clothes. "Now the gates are half closed, and no one knows when they'll open fully again." The protests in Tanzania have scared away not only traders but also transporters and tourists. Hotels and guest houses in Namanga, once filled with travelers and truck drivers, are nearly empty. Business owners are counting losses by the day. Perishable goods, like vegetables and milk, have spoiled in lorries, as delays stretch from hours to days. "It's painful," says a Tanzanian driver stranded at the border. "We earn only when we move, but now everything has stopped." Small-scale traders, especially women who sell farm produce and household goods, have been hit the hardest. Many depend on the daily cross-border movement to feed their families. With the roadblocks and curfews in Tanzania, their usual customers are gone. Some have tried to sneak goods through unofficial pannier routes, but with heavy police patrols on both sides, it's become risky. Even the digital and financial systems that support trade have been affected. Tanzania's internet restrictions have slowed mobile money transactions and online communication, making it hard for traders to confirm payments or coordinate deliveries. Cross-border markets like Longido and Tarakia have also reported sharp declines in business. At the same time, the Kenyan side is feeling the ripple effect. Petrol stations and supply shops that relied on Tanzanian customers are recording huge losses. Public transport operators who ferried passengers between the two countries have grounded their vehicles. The once busy Nairobi-Arusha route is now quiet. Behind all this is a sense of shared frustration. Kenyan traders understand the struggle their Tanzanian counterparts are facing, but they also fear the uncertainty that looms over the region. "If this goes on for long," one shopkeeper says softly, "many of us will close down completely." The Kenya Revenue Authority, KRA, and Tanzania Revenue Authority, TRA, have acknowledged disruptions in cross-border revenue collection, and both governments are said to be holding talks to restore normalcy. But until peace returns to Tanzania, trade between the two nations remains largely paralyzed. At sunset, when the sky turns golden over Namanga, the usually vibrant town feels strangely still. Trucks remain parked, market stalls empty, and the air thick with tension. For the traders and drivers who once called this place their livelihood, it feels like time itself has stopped, waiting, just like them, for the chaos to end and the border to breathe again.